Who are winners and losers from the Baltimore Ravens 2022 offseason? We talk about that and more with a very special guest next here on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we return here with another episode of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, and we are here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. And of course, we're free and available on all platforms, including on YouTube. And we're back with a Purple Friday episode. And that, of course, means our Purple Friday guest is back with us to talk about some news. We have some Ravens news here today. It's former Baltimore Ravens wide receiver and Super Bowl champion Qadry Ismail. And Q, we're kind of in the lull period right now, but the Ravens did bless us with some news yesterday as they announced that they have brought back Justin Houston. How you doing?
I am just over the moon because now we can really get into some goodness, wholesomeness, because somebody has been talking about Justin Houston. Oh, I don't know, for the last, maybe 8, 9, 10 weeks. And I think you deserve a piece of the finder's fee or the agent fee to Justin Houston, and maybe perhaps even Bisciotti should go ahead and hook you up. The Ravens owner should hook you up because Eric DeCosta had to consult with you. So you get a consultation fee for getting Justin Houston back on the roster.
You know, I will take it. I will take anything. But yeah, I think that in this situation, Q, it's so funny because you're right. I've been talking about this for a while. I know we've talked about it before, you and I, for multiple times, about how it just kind of always made sense going back months at the start of free agency, even when the Ravens had agreed to a deal with Qadry Smith, and obviously we all know how that ended. But it just felt like the Ravens could have still used the veteran presence of Houston on this team. Now he's back, and the Ravens were very thin at the position before Houston comes back. I'm not saying it's the deepest position on the roster now that Houston's back, but I think it does provide depth, veteran stability, and a player that I think the stats don't really tell a lot about what he did last year, because a lot of it came from production that isn't necessarily recorded in the box score.
Yeah, I think the bigger picture is this. Here's a guy who has extreme veteran presence, understands the nuances of the game. And I was remembering when Jacoby Jones and I were talking recently. We had an event together, and he was talking about some of the receivers that he was coaching, and he started getting in the mix of it all. And he and I were just kind of going back and forth as far as some of the nuances. Torrey Smith and I, we were doing the same thing. And, we're talking about some of the younger players and, what it looks like as far as how to learn the game within the game. And I think Justin Houston fits that bill, giving guys a chance in a situation to learn the game within the game. You got players that are now coaches that are on the roster for sure. But you also have a guy who is in the trenches and can give you that real-time feel like any other. And I think that that's a strong value. Now, I remember years back when I was doing the radio broadcast, and we were asking John Harbaugh about, hey, how do you like it when veteran players come on? He's like, listen, I'm all for veteran players coming on and helping out guys, but I also like when veteran players come out there and they're productive. So they got to be productive themselves. I think that he provides, maybe not this killer stat sheet, but he is productive enough that I think it's worthy enough of a signing. Plus the fact, like we said, teaching guys the game within the game.
Yeah, and part of it also, you do mention the veteran presence. Yes, it is important they produce. I will say that is true, but I think also the aspect that he brought last year, so it felt like he was so light in that locker room. Obviously, the Yoda nickname that he had, and I know Odafe Owe kind of, I don't know actually who bestowed it on him. It might have been Owe. I'm not exactly sure, but the fact that he was so light in that locker room is huge. And when we were looking at the outside linebacker position, yesterday, before Houston signs. It's Odafe Owe, it's Dalen Hayes, it's a couple free agent signings and Vince Beagle and Steven Means, and then a couple of undrafted guys like Jeremiah Moon and Chuck Wiley. So I think an outside linebacker addition, like we've been talking about for months, Q, was something that I think the team kind of had to do almost because there just wasn't a ton there. But with Houston, what does he provide from a veteran presence perspective? Because again, the top two guys before him at this situation, it was Owe and Hayes, both who were second-year guys.
Yeah, and I think, the one with Odafe, him being in an injury situation, Ajabu, you got to put in there too, because the Achilles is going to heal up. He is going to be back out there. Obviously, Tyus Bowser, there's some injuries there that, he has to overcome as far as his Achilles. I think the bigger picture for this group, and especially for Odafe, is the way in which you can take over a game. I think for what we've seen from Justin Houston, he's taken over games before. And so now Justin might not necessarily take over a game so much as for him, it's valuable that he takes over maybe a series here or there, preferably in the third and fourth quarter when it really matters. And I think that's something where, you look at that group, it was so important and so imperative to get Justin because of, hey, man, now is your time to shine. Real quick, when Shannon Sharpe came along and joined the Ravens, and as a receiver, here I am in the meeting room, and it was a little detail where Shannon was talking to me about, and it literally in the game real time happened, and I was able to respond, and that to me was so critical because of his veteran understanding of how to take over a game. And I think that's where Justin Houston, he doesn't have to blow it up, but when he does have those moments need to count in that third and fourth quarter. And I think that's where, a guy like Odafe, where you're like, yo, man, you got to take over a game, all four quarters. I think that's where, it can pay some dividends, both short term and long term, when you're talking about, the final stretch of the season, trying to make the playoffs.
Yeah, and I think part of the beauty of this whole thing is, I think before Houston signed here, it was almost like who else is going to step up with Owe? Because I think we all know Owe did show those flashes. Dalen Hayes showed them as well, but he was injured for most of his rookie season. So it's kind of like a little bit of an unknown factor. So you're almost like, right, it's going to be Owe, and then who else is going to be there with him? Now you have that stability in Houston where you can say, yeah, he's done it. He's been there. So I think that's going to be really key. And I want to acknowledge the fact that Bowser and Ajabo are both in that room. But for now, we don't really know if it's going to be week 1, if it's going to be week 6, if it's, not any point in the 2022 season. So the timeline is a little bit of a mystery right now. So I think, Q, it begs the question of, with the room the way it is with the 2 injuries, so taking Tyus Bowser and David Ajabo out of the equation, who in your mind is the number 1 outside linebacker on this team? Is it Odafe Owe? Is it Justin Houston? Now, I know sometimes teams lean towards the veteran in that situation, but if you had to pick, does the production of Owe last year give him that number 1 edge? Because before Houston, he was a number 1 guy. Does he keep that role, or does he maybe say, all right, he's the number 2 guy, but Houston is number 1?
No question in my mind, Odafe is the guy. You're looking at an extremely talented young man, just oozing with the measurables. We saw his sudden burst, his ability to get to the quarterback. Everybody remembers the Kansas City game where you're like, holy wow. That dude is tracking towards punching his ticket to being a Pro Bowl player. But the injury with the shoulder and all the things kind of slowed him down some. I just think that, it's all signs are pointing to him being ready to go and healthy. I think that's the main thing for him. It's hey, this is your team, your time to shine. I think that's where, a guy like Yoda, if we want to go down that track, and obviously Odafe is calling Justin that, shoot, what happened when Yoda was a master Jedi? But it was like, hey, Luke, it's time for you to rise up and take charge and take the mantle of leadership. And I think that's what Odafe is going to be charged with. I mean, that's the natural progression of things. It's just that the game within the game, going back to that again, that's where I think he's going to make his biggest mark as far as helping Adafe and giving him an opportunity to understand how to pick and choose your spots and understand, the essence of a guy, that you might be facing on the outside that you need to make a move on, or you're not sure about, a technique here or there that Justin can give him those insights that can give him that tactical advantage that you're looking for from Adafe.
Yeah, my answer is Adafe Owe too, but let me tell you, it's not bad to have Justin Houston as your number 2 guy if you're Adafe Owe, having him lining up next to you. When we talk about Tyus Bowser, what's the situation when Tyus Bowser comes back? Because he was the number 1 guy last year pretty much, and the production shows that. So would it be Owe, would it be Bowser? I think that's a conversation for when Bowser hits the field again, but I still think that now with Houston coming back, if Bowser's able to return midway through the year, let's say, something like that, if Ajabo's able to come back too, you're looking at actually a pretty deep room, assuming all the guys can stay on the field, with Ajabo and Owe and Hayes and Houston and Bowser, plus maybe an undrafted guy or a veteran option. That's a deep room there. So I'm excited to see this, but I'm also excited Houston's back in Baltimore. It's a move that I thought made sense from the beginning. And here we are, Houston re-signing with the Ravens. So it's a big deal because I think it adds to their depth. It adds to their defensive depth. And when we get back here, we're going to be talking about some winners and losers on the offensive side of the ball for the Ravens throughout the entire offseason, so free agency and the draft as well. So be sure to stay tuned for that. We still have a ton to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. First, though, I do want to tell you a bit about Dave. And there have been some times where you might want to change the past, and obviously you can't. But what if you could get a little help from your future self, and maybe you might ask to borrow a little cash, and now you actually can do that with Dave. Dave is the banking app that can help you get up to $500 instantly with extra cash. That's more money to fill your tank, buy a wedding gift, catch up on bills, or whatever you would need it for. There's no interest. There's no credit check needed. Millions of people have already downloaded the Dave app to get the financial relief they need with extra cash. So if you're in that pinch, you need some extra help, download Dave. You can think of it as a helping hand from future you. Download the Dave app from the App Store right now. That's DAVE. Sign up for an extra cash account and get up to $500 instantly. For terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Instant transfer fees apply. Banking provided by Evolve, member FDIC. The future you will thank you. We're back. Our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Allshucker still here with Qadry Ismail. And Q, I know on the offensive side of the ball, the Ravens had a couple of goals they wanted to achieve, and I think for the most part they did it. Now, I know the wide receiver position is one that some people are still, where's the Julio Jones, where's the Will Fuller? But I think part of the equation when talking about winners and losers, and I do want to say, when I call someone a loser here, I'm not calling them a loser, right? It's the whole part of the segment here. It's part of the game. So for the winners and losers part here, Q, I think we have to start with Lamar Jackson, because I know there's been, I guess he could fall in the middle category. You could call him a winner because, look, the Ravens said they're going to put protection around him, and they did it. They went out and added offensive linemen at multiple positions, key ones and quality ones at that. But he does lose his number 1 wide receiver in Marquise Brown. The Ravens don't necessarily add another person around that room, so it's Rashad Bateman being elevated to that role. Would you classify Lamar Jackson more as a winner or a loser this offseason from what the Ravens did?
Yeah, I think he is for sure a winner because what is the most important thing? It's bully ball. What is bully ball? It's using the talents of Lamar Jackson. Why the talents didn't work as well as expected. Clearly, we know what the elephant in the room is, the injury. But outside of that, I mean, let's be honest. The injuries to his tight end position, obviously Hayden Hurst being traded away, and then you add insult to injury when it comes to Ronnie Stanley and the offensive line just not being as sound and solid. Gosh, that more than anything is done him in. So what did Eric DeCosta do? He goes out there and he gets 2 more tight ends that are very good and Kohler and Likely. Everyone has been raving about them. Clearly, we have to see them in equipment and going at it in preseason, but we will. At the same time, he's buffered up his offensive line via free agency, as well as the draft with Linderbaum anchoring down the middle. Ronnie Stanley is expected to be back. I mean, I get it that we're looking at the receiver position, and we we'll continue to look at the receiver position. I think if we want to narrow it down, yeah, you could probably say Lamar's a loser in the receiver position. Um, but I think from a passing attack, bully ball scenario, clearly he's a winner. The way in which this offense is constituted, where it goes through the go-to position, is not the wide out, but in fact the tight end.
Yeah, and I think for me, Q, it all starts up front with an offense. And with Lamar Jackson, we saw, especially at the beginning of the season last year, where when he did have time in the pocket to sit there, go through his reads, and throw the football without having any pressure, he's a good thrower when he's in the pocket. He's able to have that time. But then as the season went on, we saw the tackle position with Alejandro Villanueva and Patrick McCary kind of getting injured, being in and out. And so Tyree Phillips has to step in. It's like the tackles just collapse every single play, and Lamar Jackson's running around, and the left guard position, we don't know what's going on there because it's Phillips and it's everybody rotating in. Ben Powers playing some snaps there. Really, the only two stable positions on that line last year were the center position with Bradley Bozeman and the right guard position with Kevin Zeitler. Other than that, you were kind of working with some things in there. So I think wide receiver, yes. Is it the most proven room in the league? No. But I think that with the offensive line, it will just add so much to both the running game and the passing game, where I think Jackson benefits from having that added protection around him. Like, you speaking of wide receiver, you want to know who I think is a winner? I think Rashad Bateman is a clear winner for the Ravens this offseason, because obviously the Ravens trade away Marquise Brown, but they don't add anybody else. So what that means is he ends up being elevated to the number one wide receiver position. I think for Bateman himself, that's a win.
Yeah, far and away, that's a win. We're looking at Rashad as a guy who, even last year, there were times where rhythm and timing wise, he was on point when he came to, running his route, being able to separate from the defensive back, the whole 9 yards. The Cleveland game showed me more than enough that I needed to see that he could play, opposite the tight end, so he can, go one-on-one versus guys, win on routes, make the contested catch. I think he's growing into being a younger version of an Anquan Bolden. That's winning right there. That dude is, he's on point. I think, the more timing he gets, obviously with Lamar and clearly, they were down at FAU in Florida and working out in the whole nine. I think that it makes it in a position where Rashad Bateman, for sure, number one wide receiver is a winner for the Ravens and what they're trying to do.
Yeah, and I think it goes a little bit beyond Bateman too, because I think so. Even if the Ravens had kept Marquise Brown or brought in somebody else to be a wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2, Bateman was still going to get playing time. But I think when you're looking at guys like Devin Duvernay, James Prochet, Tylan Wallace, you're wondering, well, if somebody else comes in, what does that do to their playing time? At the point we're talking here, Q, there's not another wide receiver they've brought in. So I think Duvernay, Prochet, Wallace, maybe even whatever fifth wide receiver makes the team if they keep 5. So Benjamin Victor or Mekhi Polk or Shamar Bridges. I think all those guys, the whole position is a winner because the Ravens have clearly put their trust in not just Bateman, but the rest of them.
Yeah, and I think that's something, that goes to T. Martin saying, look, what we're trying to do is believe in the guys in the room. And the fact that, they didn't go out there and quote unquote upgrade by drafting more or by bringing in some known free agent, then shoot, they like who they have. And, it's so funny because we've seen throughout this offseason, in whether it be social media or the different sporting sites, where everyone's trying to pick out what the Ravens are going to do from a wide receiver position and who they're going to bring in free agency. But the Ravens have just been holding steady. They've not flinched off the fact that they like who they see. That means that it also says your mini camps, your OTAs, all of that was really solid and strong and sound and good for what the Ravens wanted from this young group. No, they had a little bit of up and down, a couple of drops here and there in some of the practices, but overall, I promise you, if they were really bad or if they weren't producing or if there was some level of doubt, that's where T is going to go in that coach's room and be like, look, this is my feeling an assessment that we need to change, and the change is going to happen via us getting in a free agent. And John Harbaugh would probably co-sign on that, go right on over to Eric and try to get the wheels turning. So winners all around for the receiver group.
Yeah, I think so too. And I agree. I think the Ravens will look to upgrade their team in every avenue they can. And that does include if guys that they already have aren't producing. And in the Eric DeCosta era, we have seen that be a bit more, he's a bit, I think, more able to say, well, look, this draft pick isn't working out. We have to move on. And the Ozzie Newsome era was more, we're going to give these guys a runway, give these guys a chance. I'm not saying one is right or wrong, but I think with Eric DeCosta, he looks to explore every avenue. Not that Ozzie Newsome didn't, obviously, but I think that with DeCosta, we have seen with Tim Williams, with Dalen Mack, with Ben Mason, with Sean Wade, he is not afraid to move off of draft picks or younger players just because they are younger players who the team invested in. He's looking to add that. So while one strategy, I don't think either is right or wrong, but it's just a perspective that I think I've formed of DeCosta because of the moves that he's made. But Hugh, I think a loser in this situation on the offensive side of the ball would be Patrick McCary, and not because he's not going to have a role, but at this point, it feels like before Linderbaum, he was going to be the starting center unless the Ravens either drafted somebody or brought someone in through free agency. They signed that extension, obviously a really good player. But then the Ravens end up drafting Tyler Linderbaum, and I'd personally be shocked if Linderbaum wasn't starting week one. Maybe the first depth chart, McCary's number one at center because of the veteran whole aspect of things, and, Linderbaum has to go earn it. But I think the McCary in this situation, he had a starting job, and maybe now he's looking at either the left guard position or that sixth offensive line spot.
Yeah, that left guard position, boy, if I'm him, I'm circling that. I'm saying all hands on deck. I got to know the nuance. I got to feel it. I got to own it. I got to breathe it. This is me. This is my spot. This is my position. Obviously, whatever happened from a center perspective that y'all didn't like, well, y'all going to love me on this. And I'm going to make sure. And that's part of football. That's part of, the game of competing and feeling out like this is, how I grow as a professional, and the team recognizes it, my teammates recognize it, and I play. But yeah, I think he's in that loser category when you're sitting there and you're looking around like, oh, this is nice. Yeah, the NFL draft. Oh, the Ravens are. Oh, what Linderbaum? What? So, yeah, they pretty much kind of told you, we like you. We're going to give you every shot, but we don't like you as a center. We're going to go ahead and move you over.
Yeah, and maybe in that pick, too, was more of Linderbaum was too good to pass up because maybe they didn't expect him there at 25. And they're like, oh, wow, Linderbaum's still here. We have to take him. But I think there was kind of the who's going to start at center question once Bradley Bozeman left. Is McCary the guy that can start there? And I think he could have, definitely. But if he wins the left guard position, I don't think he's a loser anymore because, hey, he's starting on the offensive line. I think, hey, that's a win in itself. So maybe a guy like a Tristan Colon could be classified as a loser because if McCary is viewed as the backup center, do the Ravens keep three centers? Do they maybe look to trade their third center, which at that point would be Colon? I don't know, because they're going to have a logjam in offensive line. They have too much talent there. Unfortunately, there's not an avenue for me where every single one of these offensive linemen make the roster. So I think they're going to have to figure out where do they have enough to say they could release a talented guy or trade a talented guy. I think left guard is one of those spots, like a Ben Powers potentially. So that's an aspect to look at. But I do think that there were a lot of opportunities created by the Ravens offseason on offense. I think the same thing about the defense. So when we get back, we're going to be diving into the defensive side of the ball and talking a bit about winners and losers from there. So we still have a ton to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. First, though, I do want to tell you a bit about BetOnline. And BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your sports betting needs and sports info. You can find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including for Major League Baseball, which is going on strong right now. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. And BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including MMA, boxing, and golf. As well as that use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. We're back. Our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Olshaker is still here with Qadry Ismail. And Hugh, I know that the defense is a position that struggled a little bit in 2021 in certain aspects, the secondary being one of those. Yeah, just a little. But before we talk about the secondary, there are some guys I want to touch on there. I think in the front seven, there are some guys who you could definitely classify as winners and also losers. I think one of them who we literally just talked about was Odafe Owe. I think he's a winner in this situation because the Ravens, they did bring in, or they brought back Justin Houston. But again, there's not really that guy to say, oh, well, I'm going to take snaps from you. And then this is, I'm going to play your role. He's going to have every opportunity to go out there, play a ton of snaps, especially with the injuries to Bowser and Ajabo here, depending on when they come back. I think he's a winner based off of the increased role I think that he'll have in 2022. And you can consider maybe Dalen Hayes a winner too, because I think he's going to be relied upon in the absence of those guys as well.
More than anything, I think Dalen Hayes, excuse me, is a winner because of, as you said, those other guys coming back, from injury. He's going to get a lot of reps. He's going to get a lot of opportunity to show what he can do. And sometimes, that's all you ask for. Give me some reps. Give me some opportunities. Let me show you I can play and kind of hold the fort down. I think that's what the position he's going to be in. So clearly he's going to be a winner because if, in fact, his role lessens, but he had a ton of film showing great production, well, guess what? Other teams saw it too. If it's an in-season, trade scenario, hey, God bless Eric DeCosta for doing it. But if it isn't and he feels, well, I'm going to go elsewhere, it's not as though he is, fresh out of luck because he doesn't have any leverage. He's going to have some leverage by the fact that he really had opportunities to play. We know Odafe, that's an easy win, regardless of Justin Houston, because Odafe was drafted as one of those stud type players who is supposed to make an impact, and he did. He did make an impact. I think the shoulder just kind of, slowed his impact throughout the year, but he's back. He's going to be healthy. He's going to be out there and making his presence felt with the athleticism that we saw, with the skill set of being able to change direction, put your foot in the ground, whether it be a speed rush, bull rush, setting the edge, going down the line, being a backside disturbance, either through the run or pass, all those things. I think that's what, makes his position an easy win for us when we look at, what Odafe does. But Hayes, repetition-wise, while the other guys mend up, big win, big win.
Yeah, and I think also when you're talking about winners, I think I would have put Patrick Queen in that conversation because I will take you back to one Bobby Wagner and how that situation played out. Now, Wagner would have been a phenomenal addition on this defense. I was somebody who, we talked about his impact, you and I, what he could have brought to this team. But with Wagner not in the fold, Patrick Queen, that number one inside linebacker on this team, he has Josh Bynes now for the entire offseason. He's not coming in week 6 and kind of just, coming in cold and still having the impact he did. But now they're together again. Queen definitely from the first half of the year. Second half of the year was a lot better. So I think he's a winner in the situation that Wagner didn't end up coming to town. Now he still has that number one inside linebacker role, and he can continue to ascend and grow the way that a lot of people think he can.
Yeah, one thing we know about opportunity is how do you make the best of your opportunity? And I think in that particular situation, he certainly he flourished when the opportunity came to get another guy beside him, and they moved him out of the middle linebacker spot into more of that will spot. Now, where is he going to fit in the McDonald defense? Is Patrick Queen going to be asked to do more or less? What does it mean when you say, hey, I want everybody to know what the different roles are, not just your role? Guys talk about it, and it's saying that it's okay. But for Patrick, I think this is a really pivotal year. I'm going to hold back on saying he's a winner because obviously Wagner, yes, as you said, but, I'm curious. Maybe he is a winner for the simple fact that you do have a new coordinator. I'll give him that. But then, the flip side is, that new coordinator, how is he envisioning using Patrick Queen? And is Patrick Queen going to thrive in the usage of the way, his talents are being put forth on the field, game plan wise?
Yeah, no, you make a good point. And I think what we're gonna see from McDonald is it's not gonna be 100% different than Don Martindale, but there will be very big differences. You know, it's a new coordinator. He's gonna want to put his ideas on the field. And I am very interested, as you say, Q, to see how Queen is used by McDonald, what roles he does play. But if Wagner was there, it would have. I don't know if it would have taken away a huge amount of snaps from Queen, but what we've talked about, I know, is that the inside linebacker position with the safeties they have, in my opinion, isn't as big of a deal in terms of, oh, well, they have to have 5 guys who can play the position, because you have safeties who can come down in the box, play that role, be a dime linebacker. And speaking of dime linebackers, Q, Chuck Clark has played that role quite a bit for the Ravens over the past couple of seasons. And he's somebody who, look, honestly, if we're talking about it, he in my opinion, is a small to medium loser, I would say, because I don't think the additions of Kyle Hamilton and Marcus Williams will impact his snaps too much. But look, if we're being honest, these are 2 high quality players, one from the draft, one from free agency. It adds so much depth to the room. Like, I think as a whole, the Ravens secondary is a huge winner this offseason because of the guys they're playing with, can play off of. But maybe if we're talking from a snap perspective, I think Chuck Clark starts. I think Chuck Clark is still a starter because he's earned that. But when you're talking about when do the Ravens want to use 2 linebackers, when do they want to use more corners on the field or whatever, I think that maybe in a situation where they want to use Hamilton and Williams potentially, if those guys are playing well, maybe Chuck Clark is off the field, which is kind of crazy to think about because of the player he is. But you just don't know what the packages Mike McDonald's going to run. So I think with the safeties they added, as a whole, the secondary is a winner, but I think Chuck Clark maybe just be a tad in that loser category here.
Yeah, Chuck Clark is a loser in this category, unfortunately. We love him. We love his professionalism. We love what he brings to the table. But, you know, you got another pretty girl in the room, and you're asking her to dance over the girl that you already have. That's the bottom line. McDonald is definitely the winner in this position because, you know, there's so much that he can do versatility-wise. Now, it all got to fit. It all has to work. What does that mean? You can say what you want to say, but you know the 2 new guys, Hamilton and Williams, they gotta know their role and they gotta execute. You know, have they done it before? Collegiately, yes. Professionally, heck yeah. So the chances of them doing it is very high. We've seen Chuck Clark do it here as a Raven. But I think, you know, that edge of turnovers and of aggressiveness, you know, that's something I think that they wanted to have happen more of. You know, I know Chuck got a little bit better at it towards the end of the year, but I think overall, yeah, for Chuck Clark, as you're saying, I think he's a loser. I think, unfortunately, you know, he had the green dot on his helmet. You know, that dude is calling a defense. I mean, that's a lot of power. So you're taking a lot of my power away from me in the NFL, you know, power and playing time and all that, that's currency. So he lost a little bit of the edge, and that's why I say, you know, he's a loser in that regards.
Yeah, I think Chuck Clark still plays a lot. Like, I think he plays a ton of snaps, but you know, there will be opportunities for him.
Who expense? I mean, that's the beauty
That's
of
true.
what you and I
That's
can
true.
talk about. I mean, is it, you know, is Patrick Queen like, you know, oh my God, well, let's just put Chuck Clark in there because Patrick Queen is not doing. Oh wow, Patrick Queen is doing great. Hey Chuck, come on back here. You know, Marcus's turn right now. You know, like at whose expense? You know, oh yeah, you know, Kyle Hamilton. Oh my God, man, we thought you was good, but you're getting that rookie wall. Hey Chucky, come on in here again. You know, I think that's the beauty of what you and I can do as far as going back and forth.
It's a great point, because I think that's the beauty of why I think the secondary is a winner, because you have all these options, and also the fact that if you're a Chuck Clark or a Kyle Hamilton or Marcus Williams, you don't have to be out there for 100% of snaps every single Sunday, where you can rotate in and out, be fresh, maybe December, January, hopefully February when we're talking then. But it's a key part, because I know the Ravens, they loved their, and still do love their 3 cornerback rotations back when they had Brandon Carr and Jimmy Smith and Marlon Humphrey, and they were rotating those guys in and out on the outside, and they were doing a bunch of different stuff. So I think that when you're talking about Chuck Clark, you're exactly right. Whose expense do all these guys play? Who comes out? Who stays in? I think it's a good problem to have if you're the Ravens, because you want to have as much accumulated talent as possible. But I do think from a snap perspective, if guys want to play as much as is possible, in a situation like that, with Hamilton and Williams now in the fold, Chuck Clark might be coming out on some plays he might have stayed in for last season just because of the pure talent that they have on that roster. So I think as a whole, the Ravens had a good offseason. Was it perfect? No. I mean, they could have done a couple things differently. But I think as a whole, I'd give it a very quality grade because of what they were able to do, what they were able to bring in, and the needs they addressed. They put their guys in positions to mostly be winners, which I think is a key part of this whole thing as well. But Q, thanks so much for hopping on with me. That's all I have for you today. The Houston signings happened. We don't have to talk about it anymore. It's official. The Ravens put out the tweet. I'm excited for it. I'm glad I got to talk about it with you here today.
Yeah, I tell you what, man, kudos to you for calling it for all these weeks. And again, I just think that overall the Ravens are trending towards health. And if they are all on deck when it comes to health, like, look out. I think this is a talented roster, and I'm looking forward to another talented show with one Kevin Allstriker.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it with you too, Q. And I know once that UFA tender hit Houston, I'm like, all right, it's probably gonna happen. So let's talk about it. But I don't want to jinx it or anything. So I'm glad I did, and I'm glad it happened. But I'm looking forward to next week with DQ. Thanks so much again for hopping on. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in. When we get back here on Monday, we're gonna be diving into more Ravens content. So be sure to stay tuned for that, and I will see you back here on Monday.